So have you ever really stopped to think about why blockchain even exists? I mean, it wasn't just some tech idea that popped up out of nowhere. No, it was actually born from a massive global crisis of trust. And to really get what this technology is all about, we've got to rewind the clock back to the exact moment that made it so necessary.
Let's start with a really big question, something that gets to the heart of it all. What happens when we lose trust in the system? The financial system we all depend on for our money, our savings, pretty much our entire economy. What happens when that trust just disappears?
Well, for millions of people, that wasn't just a hypothetical question. It became terrifyingly real back in 2008. You remember the headlines, right? The collapse of Lehman Brothers sent shockwaves through the entire global financial system. And as other major companies started teetering on the edge, what did the central banks, like the US Federal Reserve, do? They started printing, and I mean printing, massive amounts of money to bail them out. Now, the idea was to save the system, sure, but it had this huge side effect. It absolutely shattered people's confidence and kicked off serious fears about out-of-control inflation.
Okay, so right in the middle of all this financial chaos, this moment of peak uncertainty, a brand new, totally radical idea pops up on the scene. And believe me, the timing was no accident. It was a direct response to the broken system.
So get this, some mysterious person, or maybe even a group of people, going by the name Satoshi Nakamoto, drops his paper online. And this paper wasn't just about a new digital currency called Bitcoin. No, it was way bigger than that. It was the blueprint for the technology underneath Bitcoin, a system specifically designed to work completely without the banks and institutions that were failing everyone.
All right, but Satoshi's idea didn't just appear out of thin air. It was actually built on an existing concept called distributed ledger technology, or DLT for short. The easiest way to think about DLT is like a shared digital notebook, but instead of one person holding the notebook, everyone in the group has an identical copy. It was already a pretty cool way to share information securely without needing one single person or company in charge.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Blockchain took that basic DLT idea and evolved it. It added one single, game-changing feature that makes all the difference in the world, and that feature is called immutability.
So what on earth is immutability? Well, it's actually pretty simple. It means that once a piece of data, like a transaction, is recorded on the blockchain, it's locked in. It's set in stone. It cannot be altered, it can't be tampered with, and it can't be deleted, ever. Seriously, this is the key thing that makes blockchain so different from everything that came before it. It creates a truly permanent, unchangeable record of truth.
Right. So you're probably wondering, how does it actually do that? How does blockchain manage to create this unbreakable digital record? Well, there's a really simple analogy that makes it all click.
Think about a normal notebook, right? You can write stuff in it, but you can also go back, use an eraser, scribble something out, or even just tear out a page. No big deal. A blockchain is totally different. Imagine that same notebook, but now every single page is digitally chained to the one before it with a kind of super strong cryptographic glue. So when you add a new page of information, it permanently seals all the pages that came before it. It's literally impossible to change anything without everyone on the network instantly knowing something's wrong. And in the world of blockchain, we don't call them pages, we call them blocks. Each block is just a list of new transactions. And here's the crucial part. It also contains a unique digital fingerprint. We call that a hash, that links it directly and securely to the block that came right before it. That's the chain in blockchain.
Okay, so that's the theory. But what does this all look like in the real world? Let's walk through a simple transaction, from the very beginning to the very end, to see how all these pieces fit together.
All right, let's imagine you want to send 10 Bitcoin to a friend. The moment you hit send, your transaction gets announced to the entire network. That's step one. Then, step two, all these super powerful computers, which we call miners, start racing to solve this really complex math puzzle. The first miner to crack the puzzle gets the reward of verifying your transaction. For step three, they bundle your transaction up with a bunch of others into a brand new block. And finally, step four. That new block gets locked onto the end of the chain permanently. At that very moment, everyone's copy of the ledger gets updated. Done. And the amazing part? This whole thing can happen in just a few minutes. But think about what wasn't in that process. Notice what's missing? There was no bank, no credit card company, no middleman of any kind needed to approve or process your transaction. That's the whole point.
Now,
It's super important to remember that even though blockchain was invented for Bitcoin, its potential is so much bigger than just digital money. The core ideas behind it can be applied to pretty much any industry you can think of. So why should you care about any of this? Well, it really boils down to 3 huge advantages. First up is security. Because the database is spread out everywhere, there's no single weak spot for a hacker to target. It's incredibly tough to corrupt. Second, you get radical transparency. Most blockchains are public, meaning anyone can look at the ledger and verify transactions for themselves. That builds a ton of trust. And third, efficiency. When you get rid of the middleman, things just get faster and a whole lot cheaper.
And this isn't just theory anymore. We're already seeing this stuff being put to work. Outside of finance, companies are using it to track products through supply chains, to make sure you're getting the real deal. It's being looked at for managing our sensitive healthcare records, and even for building voting systems that are impossible to tamper with. I mean, the possibilities are just huge. So that brings us to the future. Where is all this headed? What comes next for a technology that was literally born from a crisis of trust?
Look, the technology is definitely still growing and changing, but its core ideas, security, transparency, decentralization, they're not going anywhere. It's really poised to become a major force in our world. We're probably on the verge of a fundamental shift in how we think about and handle data, not just in finance, but in law, in healthcare, and way beyond.
And that really leaves us with one last big question. Think about it. This technology went from being an answer to a financial meltdown to a tool with what seems like limitless potential. It's come a really long way. So the real question for us right now is, what's next? Which part of our world is this technology going to change forever?